On this episode of Real Chef Tips, I talk about wine, I talk about why it's important to have quality sourced wine, and I give you a monster technique to get more flavor out of your pan and onto your plate. This episode of Real Chef Tips is brought to you by Dry Farm Wines, the only natural, lab-tested, and health-quantified wine merchant in the world. Stay tuned for more details on how you can save on your first purchase. September in California, hot as balls. What's up, everybody? It's your man Pots and Pans. Welcome back to the show. Last week we talked about sauteing, the do's and don'ts, and it was a lot of information. Because last week's episode was so información dense, I wanted to save you a little bit of time, spread things out a little bit, and so estamos aquí. If you didn't see last week's episode, that's fine. Just follow this card here somewhere, I think right here. Watch that, then come back and you'll be Gucci. Last week, TLDR. We learned how to not start a fire. We learned all the proper steps to sauteing. We learned how to make sure your food doesn't stick, what pan to use. I taught you how to get great flavor out of your ingredients, but I didn't teach you how to get the best flavor. So what's missing here? Today we're gonna be talking about something that chefs call fond. What is fond? So if you've ever cooked anything in your life, or you watched last week's episode and you tried to apply the principles, you will notice that even if you were following those steps properly, there's probably a little bit of caramelization, little bits and pieces that were sticking to the bottom of the pan or the sides of the pan. And if we would just rinse that down the drain or scrape it off and not use it, it would be a complete waste of flavor. Fond is basically just a French term that means foundation, and it applies to what we're talking about here is because all of that brown caramelization that you're seeing, that's the foundation of all of the flavor that's gonna wind up in your dish. All of that stuff that you see down at the bottom of your pan, just saddling geese, is just flavor you're missing out on. In my experience, it's one of the most commonly missed aspects for most home cooks. It is the foundation of flavor for every soup that you make, sauce, puree, stock, broth, you name it. The fond is where it's at. As I mentioned, the problem with this is that it's stuck to the bottom of the pan. Now you could waste time and energy scraping it off, but then you have these clunky bits of unpalatable bits in your food, and that might not be the most advantageous thing to do. Yes, you are scraping it off the bottom of your pan, and yes, it's getting into your final product, but it's not the most palatable or luxurious experience, which is okay for you. But if you're really trying to up your cooking game, you definitely want a new technique. The technique that we're going to deploy today is called deglazing, and that's exactly why we have our wine. Now is actually a perfect time to reintroduce today's sponsor because it is their wine that I'm going to be using. So once I started getting Real Chef Tips off the ground, I started reaching out to a few different brands that I thought would be beneficial to have on board for certain episodes like this one. I reached out to Dry Farm because I could have gone to the store and just picked up any wine off the shelf, but let's be honest, they're not conscious wines. Dry Farm Wines is a wine club, and they certainly curate some of the best wines from around the world, but what they do so well that I like about them is that they make sure all of their wines are lab tested. All of their wines are organic, they're low in sugar and therefore carbs, only the natural stuff. Same thing with any additives, only the natural stuff. You'll find very low sulfites in them. One thing that's crazy is that even some organic wines will actually test positive for glyphosate, which is just a fancy way to say Roundup. Thanks, Monsanto. Dry Farm was kind enough to hook me up with a few bottles, and they're also gonna hook you up, my gnocchis. If you follow the link in the description below, you'll actually get an additional bottle of wine for just 1 penny with your first purchase. How does one deglaze? I'll tell you. So in regards to last episode's sauteed vegetables, you wait until it's fully caramelized, fully cooked to your liking, and then you finish it off by deglazing and scraping the bottom of your pan to get the most flavor. And I'm choosing to use wine here because it's a quick and easy hack to add a ton of flavor to your dishes. You can deglaze with stocks and broths and acids, lemon, vinegar, whatever you want. You can even choose to just simply deglaze with water, which is fine should you choose to go that route, but I don't know, I mean, I guess I just expected too much. Because I had been communicating with Dry Farm and they were kind enough to send me a few bottles, today I decided to use a dry Austrian white wine that I thought just paired really well with today's dish. But you don't necessarily have to use wines for every dish that you make. I mean, it would be phenomenal, but it would also be expensive. So you can simply use different types of vinegars. You can use any other form of acid like lemon or lime. You can use stocks and broths. Just play with it. Use this as an opportunity to build your palate, understand flavor affinities, what types of ingredients work with others, how they taste solo, and once you deglaze, how that counteracts, how they interact with each other. All the flavors are changing as you're doing the cooking process, so that's a very important thing to understand moving forward. If you've ever waited too long to scrub a dish, you probably remember that if it gets cold, it's way harder to scrub. So that's probably the most important aspect to remember when deglazing. You have to keep your pan hot, keep that momentum of the heat going, medium high heat. When you add it in, there's gonna be a lot of steam happening. That's fine. In regards to wine, or any alcohol for that matter, you want all of the alcohol to cook off, not because you don't want to get drunk. Everybody wants to do that, but you also want the alcohol to cook off so it's not so harsh. You don't want it to taste like alcohol. You just want the flavor of the actual winemaking process to be left in your dish. In general, you want your alcohols to evaporate or reduce by half. You want to cook off that harshness. Here I only used about a half cup because the recipe was small. The pan is also very wide, so it dissipated very quickly. As you can see here, I've reduced it down to the point where there's little to no excess moisture. While you have the momentum of this heat, it's very important to scrape to get the most flavor off of the pan. As you can see here, once the process is finished, you should have a pretty clean, shiny pan. This almost looks like I didn't even use it. From there, there's not much else to do. Just add your finishing touches. For this recipe, I added coconut cream and lots of butter, salt, a little bit of pepper, and called that shit a day. So try out this technique. Let me know how it goes. Let me know what you actually use to deglaze with. If you use the wine, let me know how that goes. If you check out Dry Farms, which you should, let me know how that goes. That's gonna be all for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and hit the bell notification so you know when more of this content comes out. As always, I don't like saying goodbye, so I guess I'll just say thank you. Love and peace, my gnocchis. Chef out.